The crisp snap of a rifle shot echoed through the canyon, silencing the whispers that had followed Abigail Vance since she arrived in Redemption Springs. She stood unwavering, the smoking gun steady in her hands as the rattlesnake lay dead at her feet. It wasn't the first time she'd saved herself, and in this unforgiving territory of 1876 Colorado, she knew it wouldn't be the last. "Madam, that was quite the shot," a deep voice called from behind her. Abigail whirled around, rifle still raised. A man sat atop a chestnut stallion, his silhouette backlit by the setting sun. She hadn't heard him approach a dangerous oversight in these parts. "I don't recall asking for an audience," she replied, lowering her weapon only slightly. The stranger chuckled, tipping his hat back to reveal a face weathered by sun and wind, yet still handsome with eyes the color of a summer storm. "Lucas Calloway," he offered, dismounting with the easy grace of someone who'd spent more time on horseback than on foot. "Most folks call me Luke." "Most folks call me Trouble," Abigail responded, finally lowering her rifle completely. "But Abigail will do." Luke's gaze wandered to the small wagon behind her, loaded with what little she owned in the world. "You heading into town?" "What's left of it," she said, nodding toward Redemption Springs in the distance. "Though I've been told there's not much room for someone like me there anymore." His brow furrowed. "Someone like you?" "A widow, with nothing but bad memories and a reputation that precedes her." Abigail turned back to her wagon, securing her rifle. "But I was born in that town. It's time I returned, whether they want me or not." Luke watched her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "Well, Miss Abigail, the road into town can be treacherous after dark. Allow me to escort you?" She hesitated, years of hard lessons making her wary of kindness that came without a price, but something in his straightforward manner gave her pause. "I suppose another gun wouldn't hurt," she finally conceded. As they traveled the last miles into Redemption Springs, neither could have known how their paths would intertwine, nor how a town determined to cast her out would become the backdrop for a love neither of them had been looking for. The main street of Redemption Springs hadn't changed much in the 8 years since Abigail had left. The same false-fronted buildings lined the dusty road, though some names had changed. Lanterns glowed in windows against the purple dusk as Luke accompanied her wagon to the edge of town. "The boarding house is just ahead," Luke said, pointing to a 2-story clapboard building. "Mrs. Holloway runs it. She's fair, if a bit nosy." "I remember Ellen Holloway," Abigail replied, a hint of apprehension in her voice. "She was one of the first to suggest I leave town after Daniel died." Luke's eyes widened slightly. "You're that Abigail Vance? Daniel Vance's widow?" She stiffened, her grip tightening on the reins. "The very same. I see my reputation truly has preceded me." "I've heard stories," he admitted, "but I've found most stories in these parts are more fiction than fact." Before Abigail could respond, 3 men exited the saloon across the street, their attention immediately drawn to the new arrival. The largest of them, a bull-necked man with a shock of red hair, stepped forward. "Well, look what the wind blew back in," he called out, his words slurring slightly. "If it ain't the Vance woman." Abigail straightened her spine. "Evening, Mr. Pearson. I see you're still drinking away your wages." The man's face darkened. "You've got some nerve showing your face here after what happened." Luke moved his horse between Abigail's wagon and the approaching men. "Gentlemen, it's getting late. I'm sure whatever business you have can wait until morning." "Stay out of this, Calloway," Pearson snapped. "This don't concern you. This woman brought nothing but misfortune to this town." "Last I checked," Luke replied, his voice deceptively casual as he rested his hand on his holstered pistol. Redemption Springs was open to anyone looking for a fresh start. The standoff stretched for several tense moments before another man tugged at Pearson's arm. "Come on, Roy, not worth it tonight." With a final glare, Pearson allowed himself to be led back toward the saloon, but not before calling over his shoulder. "This ain't over, Abigail Vance. This town cast you out once. It'll do it again." When they'd gone, Abigail released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway, but you shouldn't have involved yourself. Their quarrel is with me." Luke turned to her, his expression serious. "What exactly happened here, Miss Vance?" Abigail's eyes clouded with memories. "My husband died in a mine collapse. They said he was reckless, ignored the warning signs. The accident killed 5 other men, including Roy Pearson's brother." Her voice grew quieter. "The town needed someone to blame. A dead man couldn't defend himself, and his widow made a convenient target. And you left. Not by choice." Abigail's jaw tightened. "But I'm back now, and I'm not leaving again no matter what they say or do." Luke studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Well then, let's get you settled at the boarding house. Tomorrow's a new day." Ellen Holloway's face went pale when she opened the door to find Abigail on her doorstep. The older woman clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Abigail Vance," she whispered, as if saying the name too loudly might summon bad luck. "Mrs. Holloway," Abigail replied evenly. "I need a room." Ellen glanced nervously at Luke, then back to Abigail. "I don't think that would be wise. There are folks here who still blame me for something I didn't do," Abigail finished for her. "I understand. But I have money, and it's getting dark." Luke stepped forward. "Mrs. Holloway, surely you wouldn't turn away a paying customer this time of night. Miss Vance needs a place to stay while she gets settled." The landlady hesitated, then grudgingly stepped aside. "One night," she conceded. "I can give you 1 night. Then you'll need to make other arrangements." "That's all I ask," Abigail said, stepping inside. She turned back to Luke, who remained on the porch. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Calloway." He tipped his hat. "My ranch is just north of town, the Lazy Sea. If you need anything." He left the offer hanging in the air between them. "I can take care of myself," she said, but there was less edge to her words than before. "I don't doubt that for a second, Miss Vance." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "But everyone needs a friendly face now and then." After he left, Ellen showed Abigail to a small room at the end of the hall. "It's not much," the older woman said, lighting the lamp on the bedside table. "It's fine," Abigail replied, setting down her small carpet bag. Ellen lingered in the doorway. "Why did you come back, Abigail? You must have known what kind of welcome you'd receive." Abigail turned to face the window, looking out at the town that had once been her home. "My father left me his claim in his will. I only just found out when his lawyer tracked me down in Denver. Harold's claim? But that mine was tapped out years ago." "Maybe," Abigail said, "but it's all I have left. It's mine, and I intend to work it." Ellen shook her head. "A woman alone, working a mine? It's madness." "Perhaps." Abigail turned back to face the landlady. "But I've survived worse than a little hard work and lonely nights." After Ellen left, Abigail sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion washing over her. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the hostile reception, the unexpected help from Lucas Calloway. She hadn't anticipated kindness from anyone in Redemption Springs. As sleep finally claimed her, Abigail couldn't shake the memory of storm-gray eyes and the first genuine smile she'd received in years. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. Abigail dressed quickly in her practical skirt and blouse, pulling her chestnut hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. She had much to accomplish today, starting with a visit to the assayer's office to register her claim. The town was already bustling when she stepped onto the boardwalk. Heads turned as she passed, conversations halting mid-sentence. Abigail kept her chin high, refusing to be cowed by the not-so-subtle whispers that followed her. The assayer's office was located at the end of Main Street, a small building wedged between the gunsmith and the telegraph office. Abigail pushed open the door, the bell above it announcing her arrival. A balding man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from his ledger. His friendly smile faltered when he recognized her. "Miss Vance, this is unexpected." "Mr. Wheeler." Abigail nodded in greeting. "I've come about my father's claim." Wheeler shifted uncomfortably behind his desk. "Ah, yes. I heard Harold had passed. My condolences." "Thank you. I have his will here, transferring ownership to me." She placed the document on his desk. "I'd like to register it officially in my name." Wheeler examined the paper, frowning slightly. "Everything appears to be in order, but—" He hesitated. "But what, Mr. Wheeler?" "That claim hasn't been worked in years. It's up in treacherous country, and most folks believe it's played out." He looked up at her over his spectacles. "Not to mention, mining is hardly suitable work for a woman alone." "I'm not asking for opinions on suitability, Mr. Wheeler. I'm asking you to record the transfer of ownership, as is my legal right." Wheeler sighed, reaching for his registry book. "Very well. But I feel obliged to warn you people around here have long memories, Miss Vance. They haven't forgotten what happened with your husband's operation." "Neither have I," Abigail replied coldly. "The difference is, I know the truth." After completing the paperwork, Abigail stepped back onto the street, the deed to her father's mine securely in her reticule. Her next task was to secure supplies, no small feat given the reception she'd received thus far. The general store's bell jangled as she entered, drawing the attention of the proprietor and the few customers inside. Conversation died immediately. The storekeeper, a heavy-set man with mutton chop whiskers, regarded her warily. "Miss Vance," he acknowledged stiffly. "What can I do for you?" "I need supplies, Mr. Daniels," Abigail said, approaching the counter. "Mining equipment, food provisions, and ammunition." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "Mining equipment?" "That's right. I've come to work my father's claim." A woman browsing fabric nearby made a sound of disbelief. "Surely you're not serious, Abigail. A woman has no business up in those hills alone." Abigail turned to face the speaker, Sarah Miller, once a close friend before everything had fallen apart. "Hello, Sarah. It's been a long time." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Too long. I heard about your father. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Abigail replied, somewhat surprised by the sincere condolence. "But this plan of yours, it's foolhardy at best, dangerous at worst." Sarah glanced at the other customers who were watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "Perhaps we could speak privately? I have a room at the back of my dressmaking shop." Curiosity got the better of Abigail. "Very well. Mr. Daniels, I'll return later for those supplies." The dressmaker's shop was just as Abigail remembered, neat and organized, with the scent of lavender hanging in the air. Sarah led her through to a small sitting area, gesturing for Abigail to take a seat. "Tea?" Sarah offered, already moving to heat the kettle on the small stove. "Thank you." Sarah busied herself with the preparations, speaking over her shoulder. "You should know, not everyone in town bears you ill will. Some of us understood you were as much a victim as anyone." Abigail's hands tensed in her lap. "Yet no one spoke up when they drove me out." Sarah turned, regret clear in her eyes. It was a dark time. Fear and grief make people act in ways they later regret. She brought 2 steaming cups to the table. "But coming back now, announcing your intention to work a mine alone. You're inviting trouble, Abigail." "I have nowhere else to go, Sarah. That claim is all I have left." "Sell it then. Use the money to start fresh somewhere else." Abigail shook her head firmly. "I won't be run off again. This is my home too." Sarah sighed, seeing the determination in her old friend's eyes. At least consider taking on a partner, someone with mining experience who can help make the operation safer. No one here would partner with me. Perhaps not someone from town? Sarah suggested. What about that rancher who escorted you in yesterday? Luke Calloway? Abigail blinked in surprise. Mr. Calloway? He's a rancher, not a miner. He's more than that, Sarah replied. He worked the mines for years before buying his ranch, knows more about geology than most. And he has a reputation for fairness, doesn't get caught up in town politics. The information gave Abigail pause. Why would he help me? Sarah shrugged. You'd have to ask him. But he's known to have a soft spot for underdogs. She reached across the table to touch Abigail's hand. Just think about it. You don't have to face everything alone. The conversation with Sarah left Abigail with much to consider. After purchasing a more modest selection of supplies than originally planned, enough to last her a few days at the claim site, she headed back to the boarding house to collect her things. Ellen Holloway was waiting for her in the narrow foyer, a conflicted expression on her lined face. I've been thinking, Abigail. Perhaps I was hasty yesterday. If you need the room for a few more nights. The unexpected offer took Abigail by surprise. What changed your mind? Ellen glanced toward the window. Let's just say someone reminded me that Christian charity extends even to those we find difficult. Following her gaze, Abigail caught sight of Lucas Calloway across the street, deep in conversation with the town's minister. So, he'd been advocating for her. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway, Abigail said, a mix of gratitude and unease washing over her. She wasn't accustomed to having allies. I would appreciate a few more days while I get my bearings. Later that afternoon, Abigail stood outside the livery stable, negotiating the purchase of a sturdy mule to transport her equipment to the mine. The transaction was not going well. Price just went up, the livery owner said with a sneer. Another $10. That's highway robbery, and you know it, Pete, Abigail argued. That mule isn't worth more than $20 total. Take it or leave it. Folks like you don't get to dictate terms around here. A shadow fell across them as Lucas Calloway stepped into the stable yard. Everything all right here? Pete's expression soured further. This doesn't concern you, Calloway. When I see someone being cheated, it concerns me. Luke's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath it. He turned to Abigail. Miss Vance, I happen to have an extra pack mule I'm looking to sell. Reasonable price. Good temperament. Would you be interested? Abigail recognized the lifeline he was offering. Pride warred with practicality for a moment before she nodded. I would indeed, Mr. Calloway. Excellent. I can bring him by tomorrow morning, if that suits. That would be fine, she replied, ignoring Pete's glare as she followed Luke out of the stable yard. Once they were out of earshot, Abigail stopped. You don't actually have a mule to sell, do you? Luke's lips quirked in a half-smile. I do, as a matter of fact. But I would have said just about anything to get you out of that situation. Why are you helping me? Abigail asked bluntly. You don't know me. I know enough, he replied. I know you've been judged unfairly. I know what it's like to have people decide who you are based on half-truths and fear. Something in his tone made Abigail wonder about his own story, but she didn't press. I appreciate the assistance, but I can't keep relying on your intervention. People will start to talk. Let them, Luke said with a shrug. This town could use something new to gossip about. Despite herself, Abigail smiled, a small, tentative thing, but genuine. Sarah Miller mentioned you have mining experience. Luke looked surprised. I do. Spent 5 years in the silver mines before I had enough saved for my ranch. I'm heading up to survey my father's claim tomorrow, Abigail said, choosing her words carefully. I could use someone with experience to give me an honest assessment of what I'm dealing with. Luke considered her for a long moment. I could spare a day, he finally said. I'll bring the mule in the morning and we can head up together. I can pay you for your time, Abigail offered quickly. Let's see what we're dealing with first, Luke replied. Then we can discuss terms. As they parted ways, Abigail found herself wondering about Lucas Calloway, a man willing to stand up for a stranger against his own neighbors. In a town full of people eager to see her fail, he had offered help without conditions. It was unexpected, and more than a little unsettling. Trust didn't come easily to Abigail anymore. But as she prepared for the journey ahead, she found herself hoping that, just maybe, she had found an ally in Redemption Springs. Dawn broke clear and cold the next morning. Abigail was already waiting on the boarding house porch, dressed in practical trousers beneath her split riding skirt, an outfit that had earned her a disapproving look from Mrs. Holloway, but would serve her better in the rugged terrain ahead. Luke arrived precisely when promised, leading not only the pack mule he'd mentioned, but also 2 saddled horses. "Good morning," he greeted, handing her the reins to a dappled mare. "This is Pepper. She's sure-footed on mountain trails." Abigail eyed the horse appreciatively. "She's beautiful, but I didn't agree to rent a horse." "Consider it part of the package," Luke said easily. "The trail to your father's claim is too steep for a wagon. Besides, Pepper needs the exercise." Knowing when she was outmaneuvered, Abigail accepted the reins with a nod of thanks. They loaded her supplies onto the pack mule, securing everything carefully. "How far is it to the claim?" Luke asked as they mounted up. "About 4 hours' ride, according to the deed," Abigail replied. "Up Sawback Ridge, near Timber Creek." Luke's eyebrows rose. "Rough country. Your father picked a remote location." "He always preferred solitude to society," Abigail said, a hint of fondness in her voice. "Said people complicated things." "Wise man," Luke commented as they set off, the town gradually falling away behind them. The journey took them through increasingly challenging terrain, up steep switchbacks, across rushing streams, and through stands of pine and aspen. As they rode, conversation flowed more easily than Abigail would have expected. Luke asked about her life before returning to Redemption Springs, and she found herself sharing more than she had intended. "After I left town, I moved from place to place for a while," she explained. "Worked as a seamstress, a laundress, even dealt cards in a Denver gambling hall for a time." "Sounds like you're a woman of many talents," Luke remarked. "Survival requires adaptability," Abigail replied matter-of-factly. "What about you? How did you end up in Redemption Springs?" Luke was quiet for a moment, guiding his horse around a fallen tree. "I came west after the war. Like many men, I was looking for a fresh start." His expression clouded briefly. "Spent those years in the mines, as I mentioned. When I'd saved enough, I bought land north of town. Been building the lazy sea ever since." "The war changed many men," Abigail observed carefully, noting the shadow that had crossed his face. "It did," he agreed. "Some for better, some for worse. I like to think I'm somewhere in between." They lapsed into comfortable silence as the trail grew steeper. By midday, they had reached a high ridge overlooking a narrow valley. A small stream glinted silver in the sunlight below. "There," Abigail said, pointing to a dark opening in the hillside across the valley. "That should be it. My father's claim." Luke squinted against the sun. "Let's take a closer look." They descended carefully into the valley, the horses picking their way along the steep trail. As they approached the mine entrance, Abigail felt a strange mixture of anticipation and trepidation. This was her inheritance, her last connection to her father. The mine opening was smaller than she had expected, partially overgrown with vegetation that spoke of years of abandonment. A weathered sign bearing her father's name hung crookedly above the entrance. Luke dismounted, tying his horse to a nearby tree. "Stay here while I check the stability." "I'm coming with you," Abigail insisted, already swinging down from her saddle. He looked like he wanted to argue but simply nodded, retrieving a lantern from his saddlebag. Stay close and watch your step. Abandoned mines can be treacherous. The tunnel was surprisingly well constructed, with solid timber supports every few feet. The air was cool and damp, carrying the mineral scent of earth and stone. Luke moved slowly, examining the walls and ceiling with practiced eyes. Your father knew what he was doing, he commented, holding the lantern higher. These supports are still sound. They ventured deeper, Luke occasionally stopping to examine a vein of rock or test the stability of the tunnel. About 50 yards in, the passage widened into a small chamber. Luke held the lantern up, revealing a face of rock streaked with glinting material. Is that? Abigail began, stepping closer. Silver, Luke confirmed, running his fingers along the wall. And a decent amount of it. He turned to her, genuine surprise in his eyes. Miss Vance, I believe your father's claim is far from played out. Hope surged through Abigail. You're certain? I've seen enough ore in my time to know this is promising, he replied. Not a bonanza, but enough to provide a steady income if worked properly. They explored further, finding several more promising veins before Luke suggested they return to the surface. By the time they emerged into the sunlight, Abigail's mind was racing with possibilities. I'll need equipment, she said as they unpacked their lunch by the stream, and probably at least 2 workers to start. Luke settled beside her on a fallen log. Finding workers might be your biggest challenge. The men in town aren't likely to take orders from a woman they already mistrust. Abigail's enthusiasm dimmed. I hadn't considered that. There's another option, Luke said after a thoughtful pause. A partnership. Abigail looked up sharply. With you. He nodded. I have the equipment, the knowledge, and connections to miners who would work for me without question. You have the claim. Together, we could make this operation profitable. Suspicion flared in Abigail's chest, an old reflex born from too many broken promises. Why would you want to partner with me? You must know associating with me could damage your standing in town. I've never much cared for others' opinions of me, Luke replied with a half smile. Besides, I've been looking to diversify beyond cattle. Mining is in my blood, I miss it sometimes. Abigail studied him, searching for signs of deception but finding only straightforward interest. What terms would you propose? Equal partnership, he said without hesitation. We split costs, labor, and profits. I can front the initial investment for equipment and wages. It was more than fair, generous even. Still, Abigail hesitated. I need time to consider. Of course, Luke agreed. It's not a decision to be made lightly. He paused, then added, whatever you decide, I'm glad I could help you assess the claim today. As they packed up to begin the journey back to town, Abigail found herself watching Luke with new eyes. His offer of partnership wasn't just financial assistance, it was an acknowledgement of her as an equal, something few men had ever granted her. The ride back was quieter, each lost in their own thoughts as the afternoon shadows lengthened across the landscape. As Redemption Springs came into view, Abigail felt a renewed determination. Whether or not she accepted Luke's offer, she now knew her father's mine had value, and with it, a chance at the fresh start she desperately needed. I'll think about your proposal and give you my answer tomorrow, she said as they reached the edge of town. Luke nodded. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. They parted ways at the boarding house, Luke continuing toward the livery with the horses and mule. Abigail watched him go, a confusing mix of emotions stirring within her. For the first time since returning to Redemption Springs, she felt something dangerously close to hope. That evening, Abigail sat on the edge of her bed, a pencil and paper in hand as she calculated figures. The initial costs of reopening the mine would be substantial, more than she could afford on her own. Luke's offer of partnership made practical sense, but trusting anyone, especially a man she barely knew, went against every instinct she'd developed over the past 8 years. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Sarah Miller standing in the hallway, a covered basket in her hands. "I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal after your journey today," Sarah explained, holding out the basket. "And perhaps some company, if you're amenable." The unexpected kindness momentarily robbed Abigail of words. Finally, she stepped back, gesturing for Sarah to enter. "That's very kind of you." Sarah bustled in, setting the basket on the small table by the window and unpacking its contents, a container of beef stew still warm from the oven, fresh bread, and 2 slices of apple pie. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned you went to your father's claim with Luke Calloway. How did you find it?" As they shared the meal, Abigail found herself recounting the day's discovery and Luke's unexpected offer of partnership. Sarah listened attentively, her expression thoughtful. "Luke Calloway is well respected," she said when Abigail had finished. "He's a man of his word. If he offered partnership, he means it fairly." "People would talk," Abigail pointed out. "A single man and woman in business together." Sarah's lips quirked in a small smile. "People already talk, Abigail. At least this way. You'd have something worthwhile to show for it." "What do you know about him?" Abigail asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Beyond his reputation for fairness. He came to town about 5 years ago," Sarah replied. "Keeps mostly to himself, but he's generous when someone's in need. Fought for the Union in the war, was an officer, I believe. Lost his family to fever before coming west." She paused. "There are those who find him too progressive in his thinking. He hired 2 former slaves to work his ranch when no one else would give them employment." This new information shifted something in Abigail's perception of Luke. A man who stood by his principles, even when unpopular. A man not unlike her father had been. "I think I'll accept his offer," she said quietly, surprising herself with the decision. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Good. And know that not everyone in town shares Roy Pearson's animosity toward you. Some of us remember the girl you were before tragedy struck." After Sarah left, Abigail stood at the window watching the lamplight flicker in windows across town. Redemption Springs had cast her out once, branded her with her husband's supposed sins. But now, with a valuable claim and a potential ally in Luke Calloway, perhaps she could forge a new place for herself. For the first time since returning, Abigail allowed herself to imagine a future here, not just surviving, but truly belonging again. The following morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect early summer day. Abigail dressed with care in one of her better dresses, not out of vanity, but because she intended to formalize a business arrangement. She was just pinning her hat when another knock came at her door. This time it was Mrs. Holloway, looking flustered. "There's a situation downstairs you should be aware of," she said without preamble. "Roy Pearson and several men are demanding to speak with you." Abigail's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "What about?" "They say they have evidence your husband deliberately sabotaged the mine before the collapse," Mrs. Holloway whispered. "They're talking about pressing charges against you as his widow." Cold fury replaced Abigail's momentary fear. "That's absurd. Daniel would never have endangered those men, including himself." "I don't believe it either," the older woman said, surprising Abigail. "But they're riled up. And there's whiskey on their breath already, despite the early hour." Abigail straightened her spine. "I won't hide from them. Please tell them I'll be down momentarily." When Mrs. Holloway left, Abigail took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then, on impulse, she retrieved her father's pocket watch from her bag, drawing strength from the familiar weight of it in her palm. She had faced worse than Roy Pearson's drunken accusations. The parlor fell silent as Abigail descended the stairs, Roy Pearson stood in the center of the room, flanked by 3 other men. His face was flushed with drink and anger. "Miss Vance," he sneered, making her title sound like an insult. "We've come to discuss your husband's crimes." Abigail met his gaze steadily. "My husband committed no crime, Mr. Pearson. The mine collapse was a tragic accident." "That's not what Jenkins says," one of the other men interjected. "He found Daniel's journal in some old mining office records. Says your husband knew the supports were failing and didn't report it." "Jenkins is mistaken or lying," Abigail replied coldly. "Daniel documented every inspection in that journal. If anything, it would prove his diligence." Pearson stepped closer, his bulk intimidating in the small parlor. "We want you gone from Redemption Springs by sundown. If not, we'll see you stand trial for your part in covering up your husband's negligence." Before Abigail could respond, the front door swung open. Luke Calloway stepped into the parlor, his tall frame filling the doorway. Behind him stood Sheriff Miller, Sarah's husband, his expression grim. "That's enough, Roy," the sheriff said firmly. "You're disturbing the peace and making accusations without evidence." "We have the journal," Pearson insisted. "You have pages of a journal that could have been written by anyone," Luke countered, stepping further into the room. "And even if it was Daniel Vance's, one man's interpretation doesn't constitute evidence of wrongdoing." Pearson's face darkened as he turned on Luke. "You're taking her side now, Calloway? What's she offering you that's worth turning against your neighbors?" A dangerous calm settled over Luke's features. "I'd be careful with accusations like that, Roy. Miss Vance and I have a business arrangement regarding her father's mine. Nothing more." "A business arrangement?" Pearson repeated with a nasty laugh. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" Luke moved so quickly that Pearson had no time to react. In one fluid motion, he had the larger man by the collar, backing him against the wall. "Apologize to the lady," he said, his voice low and even. Pearson struggled, but Luke's grip was firm. "Sheriff, are you going to allow this?" he demanded. Sheriff Miller sighed. "I suggest you apologize, Roy. Then you and your friends can sleep off whatever you've been drinking since dawn." After a tense moment, Pearson muttered something that might have passed for an apology. Luke released him, stepping back. "Now," the sheriff continued, "I don't want to hear any more about journals or trials without actual evidence. This town has seen enough division." After Pearson and his friends had been escorted out, Abigail turned to Luke. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he replied simply. "No one should have to face unfounded accusations alone." His words warmed something long cold inside her. "I was coming to find you this morning," she said. "I've decided to accept your partnership offer." A genuine smile spread across Luke's face. "I'm glad to hear it." He offered his hand, and Abigail took it, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and honest living. "Partners, then." "Partners," she agreed, finding it easier to smile than she would have expected. Over the following weeks, Abigail and Luke fell into an efficient working relationship. True to his word, Luke provided equipment and hired 2 experienced miners who asked no questions about taking orders from a woman. They made daily trips to the mine, gradually clearing the old tunnels and establishing new ones where the silver veins looked most promising. The work was hard, but satisfying. Each day, Abigail grew more confident in her knowledge of mining operations, learning quickly from Luke and the other miners. By the end of the first month, they had extracted enough ore to warrant a trip to Denver for proper smelting and sale. "The first profits," Luke said with satisfaction as they divided the proceeds in the small office they'd established at the back of the assayer's building. "Not a fortune, but a solid start." Abigail smiled as she counted her share. "More than enough to cover my expenses and put something aside." Their success had not gone unnoticed in town. While some still regarded Abigail with suspicion, others had begun to soften. The mine provided work not just for their hired miners, but for local men who transported ore and supplies. Money flowing into local businesses had a way of changing attitudes. "There's a social at the church on Saturday," Luke mentioned casually as they locked up the office. "Music, dancing, food. The whole town will be there." Abigail hesitated. "I'm not sure that would be wise. Not everyone has accepted my return." "More have than you might think," Luke countered. "Besides, we should celebrate our first profitable month." He gave her a hopeful look that made her heart skip a beat. "Would you consider attending with me? As my guest?" The invitation caught Abigail off guard. Their relationship had remained strictly professional, though she couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt in his presence. "You mean as your business partner?" Something flickered in Luke's eyes, disappointment perhaps. "If that's what you prefer." Abigail found herself unwilling to disappoint him. "I would be honored to attend with you, Luke. As your guest." The smile that lit his face was worth any social discomfort she might face. Saturday evening arrived clear and mild. Abigail wore her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the amber in her eyes. Mrs. Holloway, who had become something of an ally in recent weeks, helped arrange her hair in a fashionable style. "You look lovely," the older woman said approvingly. "Luke Calloway won't know what hit him." Abigail felt her cheeks warm. "It's not like that between us?" Mrs. Holloway gave her a knowing look. "Perhaps not yet. But I've seen the way he watches you when you're not looking." Luke arrived precisely on time, looking handsome in a clean black suit that set off his broad shoulders. His eyes widened appreciatively when Abigail descended the stairs. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The church was transformed for the social, lanterns casting a warm glow over tables laden with food, and a space cleared for dancing. A small group of musicians played near the altar, and couples were already spinning across the floor. Conversations paused briefly as Luke and Abigail entered, but to her surprise, the reception was largely welcoming. Sarah Miller immediately approached, greeting them warmly and introducing Abigail to several women she hadn't yet met. Luke was pulled into a conversation with some of the local businessmen, who seemed genuinely interested in the progress at the mine. "See?" Sarah whispered. "I told you attitudes were changing." As the evening progressed, Abigail found herself enjoying the simple pleasure of community for the first time in years. She danced with several partners, including the sheriff and the town doctor, both of whom treated her with respectful courtesy. But it was the dance with Luke that left her breathless. As he guided her through the steps of a waltz, his hand warm at her waist, Abigail realized with startling clarity that what she felt for him had grown beyond gratitude or business respect. "You're fitting in," Luke observed softly as they moved across the floor. "This town is remembering who you really are." "Thanks in no small part to you," Abigail replied. His eyes held hers steadily. "You did the hard part, Abigail. You came back and faced them down. You showed them your strength and dignity. I just provided a little practical assistance." The music drew to a close, but Luke didn't immediately release her. Instead, he leaned closer and murmured, "Would you walk outside with me? There's something I'd like to discuss." Curious, Abigail nodded. They slipped out into the cool evening air, walking to a small garden beside the church. The sounds of music and laughter drifted after them, softened by distance. Luke seemed uncharacteristically nervous, running a hand through his hair as they stopped beneath an old oak tree. "Abigail, these past weeks working with you have been the happiest I've known in a very long time." Something in his tone made Abigail's heart quicken. "I've enjoyed our partnership as well." "It's more than the partnership for me," Luke admitted, his voice dropping lower. "I find myself thinking about you even when we're not working. I admire your courage, your intelligence, your determination." He took a deep breath. I care for you, Abigail. As more than a business partner. As more than a friend. Abigail stood very still, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. After Daniel's death and her exile, she had built walls around her heart, never expecting to let anyone breach them again. Yet somehow, this quiet, honorable man had found his way through. You don't have to respond now, Luke continued when she remained silent. I understand this may come as a surprise. I just wanted you to know where I stand. It's not a surprise, Abigail finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Not really. I think I've known for some time that things were changing between us. She looked up at him, vulnerability in her gaze. But I'm afraid, Luke, the last time I loved someone, I lost everything. Luke stepped closer, slowly enough that she could have moved away if she wished. When she didn't, he gently took her hands in his. I can't promise we won't face hardships, Abigail. Life offers no such guarantees, but I can promise that you won't face them alone again. Not as long as I'm breathing. The simple sincerity of his words broke something inside her, not in a way that hurt, but in a way that healed. Tears welled in her eyes. I care for you too, Luke. More than I thought I could ever care for anyone again. His smile in that moment was like sunrise after the longest night. Slowly, reverently, he leaned down and brushed his lips against hers, a gentle question. Abigail answered by stepping closer, her hands moving to rest against his chest as she returned the kiss with growing confidence. When they finally parted, Luke kept his arms loosely around her waist. They said you'd never belong here again, he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But I think they were wrong. Abigail smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. With you, belonging feels as natural as breathing. In the soft lamplight spilling from the church windows, they stood together, two people who had found in each other not just partnership or passion, but a home neither had expected to find. Behind them, Redemption Springs continued its revelry, unaware that its name had finally come true for the woman it had once cast out. 3 months later, Abigail stood at the entrance to the mine, reviewing production figures with satisfaction. The operation had expanded to include 6 full-time miners, and the quality of ore remained consistently high. What had begun as a desperate gamble had transformed into a thriving enterprise, and in the process, transformed her life as well. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. Luke rode into the clearing, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of her. These days, his smiles came easier and more often, as did her own. Good news from Denver, he called as he dismounted. The last shipment fetched top dollar. The assayer said it was some of the purest silver he's seen. Abigail met him halfway, accepting both the news and the kiss he offered. Their courtship had progressed steadily, conducted in full view of the town. To her surprise, most had accepted it with little comment, or at least, little negative comment. Their success in business had earned them respect, if not universal affection. I have news too, Abigail said when they parted. Roy Pearson came to the office this morning. Luke's expression immediately darkened. What did he want? To apologize, Abigail replied, still somewhat bemused by the encounter. He admitted the journal pages were misleading when read out of context. The full journal actually shows Daniel had ordered new supports the very day of the collapse. Luke's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's unexpected. Apparently, Sheriff Miller found the complete journal and confronted him. Abigail shook her head in wonder. 8 years of blame, and now this. Does it change things for you? Luke asked carefully. Knowing the town was wrong? Abigail considered the question. It brings closure, she said finally, but it doesn't change my path forward. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and certain. That path is with you, if you'll have me. In response, Luke reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I was planning to wait until dinner tonight, but perhaps this is the perfect moment after all. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a small diamond flanked by two sapphires. Abigail Vance, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Joy welled up inside her, so powerful it took her breath away. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes, Luke, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Abigail marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had returned to Redemption Springs seeking only justice and independence, never imagining she would find love and belonging as well. They said I'd never belong again, she murmured as Luke drew her into his embrace. He pressed his forehead gently against hers. They were wrong. You belong right here with the town, with the mine. He kissed her softly. And most of all, with me. In his arms, Abigail knew it was true. After years of exile and loneliness, she had found her home not just in a place, but in a person. And with Luke Calloway by her side, belonging felt as natural and necessary as breathing.